Hello everyone, this is Soumya. I'm a first year postgraduate student in Chinese studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and today we're going to be discussing about the importance of culture in translation. Language translation and culture are the key ingredients of communication, and as we can say, culture has given birth to languages, and translation and culture are intimately connected, especially in business translation, meaning in both source and target languages are profoundly affected by their cultural context. In order to understand a culture or translate any document in that culture, translation plays a major role. For instance, if a translation agency in Delhi works on document for a UK client, then the slang, tone, and language have to conform to the UK business culture. This shows the role that translation plays in the culture. Let's examine what culture, tradition, and language are and how they are related to each other. Translation of seemingly simple phrase can actually contain cultural nuances that, if left out, can convey the opposite of what was intended. It is therefore dangerous to translate without cultural context, especially when meaning is important. Now we're going to be discussing about the translation and culture, the literal and contextual meaning. Translator must be able to determine the importance of the cultural context of any translated sentence, what the phrase means. It is better to phrase it as it actually means, not necessarily what it literally means, and make it clear in the target language and in the cultural context of the target language. Many institutions and practices exist in one culture, but that doesn't mean it exists in another culture. In cultures, deeply held beliefs and even commitment to truth varies. The psychological entities associated with these unique culture-based concepts have distinct meaning in one linguistic context that have not been duplicated in other contexts. So, what would be the best way to translate those unique cultural characteristics? I would say an interpreter must be immersed in both the cultures of source language and target languages. Second question arises is that what are the benefits of good translation and how do they affect cultural exchange? I would say a good translation gives the reader the same sense of immersion that he or she might get while reading a text in their native tongue. Translation is important in culture since it allows beliefs and ideas to be communicated properly so that people with different literally and cultural background can understand them. And now we're going to be discussing about the taboos and value differences. In some cultures, deeply held restriction can be seen as completely neutral in other cultures. When finding meaning equivalent for words and symbols in foreign language, the translator must be considered their moral and spiritual association. There are some translation confoundings that occur in the value dimension. Translator may experience difficulty due to culture. They need to be proficient not only in the language they are translating but also the culture of the source and target language. Sometimes a cultural relevant text lost some of its meaning in translation or need more information because it is impossible to effectively convey all of the level of meaning. And that is when we say that the text got lost in translation. And each culture gives the language a different context. Changing cultures can result in different meaning of the same word. Translation often suffer from meaning differences that are sometimes accompanied by slight or intense value difference. And at last, I will discuss the influence of culture on translation. Neither language nor translation can be ignored when it comes to cultural influences. The translation is easier and more accurate when translator is acquainted with another culture. In order to achieve semantic equivalence during translation, you need a good understanding of target language as well as the culture of source language. So the other day I was reading this book. It's called Stray Bird in Chinese translation, which is annotated and compiled by Priyadarshi Mukherjee, professor in Chinese and Sinological Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. So this book is all about how some translators have mistranslated Tagore's work, especially Feng Tang. Feng Tang actually used some of the erotic languages and vulgarized Tagore's work. Because of that, he was even banned to visit India. And Fengtang ignored the timeline of Tagore and vulgarized certain poems for sake of gaining cheap popularity among the youngsters with words incompatible of Tagore's era. The amount of misinterpreting Tagore's spirit. And that's why I would say that culture plays a very important role in translation. Because of this mistranslated, misinterpreted work, you might would have to face consequences. So to be a good translator, you need to translate the work as it is. It's not like you can translate them in your own way and you cannot just change the meaning of the actual work. Thank you. That's all from my side.